So I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is one of our workshop series. We had a couple in the beginning semester, and this will be the last one for the semester. However, we'll have some more for next semester. So just keep posted through our Instagram, as well as additional updates as well. So for the agenda today, we're going to briefly discuss a little bit about what Julie and I do regarding academic success coaching, and we'll provide more information towards the end of the presentation. We'll discuss in more details, get ready for game day, which is exam time, since we are approaching final exams in the end of the semester. So we want to help you guys feel prepared and give you some tips and tricks when it comes to studying as well as test taking. And then finally, we'll provide you all with our contact information for the Tutoring and Testing Center and additional updates as well. So academic success coaching is basically a one-on-one session that we have with students that are about 50 to 60 minutes. And typically we tend to discuss one of the 8 different facets of college life within these sessions, right? So that could be either how to organize your schedule, how to set goals for yourself, as well as balancing your school life and personal life. And I know when I've had some of these sessions with some of my students as well, even though we talk a lot about either time management or how to identify some study skills that may be helpful for them, we start learning throughout these 50 to 60 minutes of sessions how to manage your stress, or how to find things, coping skills or things like that to make you feel better throughout the semester. So what we essentially try to do is to tailor these sessions based off of your academic needs and some of your goals as well. Do you have anything to speak to that, Julie, in regards to the sessions?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things about doing this is it doesn't feel like very, professional. It's more of just like being able to talk to someone and express to them, on a personal and more comfortable level, rather than like just being very strict.
Yeah, exactly. And most of us are undergraduate and graduate students, so we've been there. We can definitely help you, providing some of the things that have been helpful for us, but also making sure that we're as collaborative as possible within our sessions too. So just to briefly go over how to make an appointment with us, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to go through SharkLink, click on Navigate, and then you're going to click on Schedule an Appointment. And we'll come back to this towards the end of the presentation, just provide more information with that as well. So, like we already alluded to, what we're going to be talking about today is get ready for game day, right? So as we mentioned before, we're almost coming towards final exam time, which is a very stressful time. So we wanted to help you all find some ways that could be helpful when it comes to studying, find out how to prepare for certain exams, as well as test taking strategies, and improving your overall memory. So when it comes to studying, as we all know, it can be really difficult depending on how many classes that you have per semester, or the type of classes that you're taking in a semester, right? So one thing that we tend to tell a lot of our students in academic success coaching, that in order to be successful, especially for your semester, you want to make sure that you find something that's going to be helpful for you when it comes to studying, right? Because it helps you increase your engagement, as well as help you attain some of your personal, academic, and professional goals. And I know for me, particularly to take, for example, being in the clinical psychology program, I had to learn that when it comes to studying, I knew that was going to be beneficial for me in order for me to become a better psychologist, right? So I had to always remind myself, well, how is this going to benefit me in 5 to 6 years from now? And how can I be more successful as I go throughout my college career when it comes to studying? And I think one thing that's really helpful as you start learning different techniques that work best for you is you start identifying other techniques that are going to be suitable or effective for other classes as well. Because I'm sure you all are taking 4 to 5 different classes. All these different classes are going to look differently. So once you find something that works best for you for each class, it'll help you become more successful. And as we know, if you don't study or don't try to find the time to study for these particular classes, it leads to a reduction in grades, poor academic performance, as well as increasing anxiety, self-doubt, and also making you feel less interested in the topic, right? When it came to studying for you, especially in undergrad right now, Julie, have you had like any experiences when it comes to like being motivated to study or having difficulties with studying?
I think the biggest challenge that I face is just like dispersing myself equally along among all my classes, because it's so easy just to focus on one class and then you crash and burn for your other four. So I think making a schedule and just making sure I disperse myself evenly amongst all my classes is the best way for me to study the best.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point because when you actually spread yourself out and prioritize what you need to say for each class, you don't feel like burnt out by the time it's like midterm time because you're spending so much time on one particular class and things like that. So I think it is a really good point to disperse and actually identify how you like to devote to each and every class per semester. And Julie basically brought this up too when it comes to some of the challenges as well as roadblocks when it comes to not only test taking but also studying. There's several different ones, right? So one I can attest to this, I'm so bad at times is procrastination. So even though you have maybe a good month or two for an exam, sometimes saying, well, I can get that to later may not be the best route, right? So that's one challenge. Low motivation sometimes can really affect our ability or even motivation to study, as well as test taking anxiety. So if we're constantly worrying about the test that's approaching, we're gonna feel less inclined to take the time to study, right? What are some other roadblocks? I know you mentioned about like evenly dispersing your time, Julie, but what are some other challenges that you've noticed as well when it comes to like test taking or studying?
I just think that, making sure that you have the time to take out like studying in your schedule, because there's people that work and there's people that have so many like different classes. So just making sure that you set apart that time to actually sit there and study, because like you said, like you could always think, oh well, the exam's not for a couple weeks. Well, the further that you push it off, it's like the further it's going to make your anxiety go up. So I think just prioritizing like an exam just as much as like any of your other assignments is equally important.
Yeah, exactly. Like time management and just prioritizing will be your best friend. And we definitely have a lot of tips and tricks that we're going to be talking about as we go through the presentation as well that Julie mentioned. So what can I do, right? When it comes to feeling more motivated to study, to reduce the amount of time that we procrastinate, as well as effectively managing our time. So there's several ways, right? But I think the one thing that I really like to do is self-testing. And essentially what self-testing means is when you basically look at the material as much as you can without looking back at it during that studying period. And that can be really super helpful because I know, for example, if I have like a study guide and a lot of answers are blank, or if I have to provide like a short essay for something, I'm able to kind of write down what I already know. And if I don't know something, that'll give me a better idea of how I should readjust how I'm studying for that test or for the exam, or what I can do to kind of maximize the amount of information I'm retaining during that studying period. And I think one thing that's important when it comes to self-testing is that it really helps us improve future learning, not only for one particular class, I'm going to say chemistry, for example, but also if we're taking additional courses for next semester or even next year, it'll help us feel more prepared. But also it helps us feel increases the opportunity for us to retrieve that information at a later point in time. And there's a really good video that I found on YouTube that basically brings up more information regarding why it's important to self-test, as well as how to self-test faster, especially if you are preparing for that final exam or even that quiz for a particular subject. So we have more tips and tricks, so we're not done yet when it comes to studying skills as well as test taking strategies. So one that I am a firm believer with when it comes to studying techniques is really spacing out your review. And that can look two different ways, right? So when I think of like spacing out your review, that is, for example, devoting maybe a week or two prior to the exam to identify how you would like to study the material. So for example, if you need to study, I'm going to keep on using a lot of biology and chemistry examples. But if you have to study 5 chapters for biology, for example, you want to identify, well, how many chapters would I like to study for a day or within an hour or two? And then also consider how long you would like to take your breaks within that period of time. And one good thing about this when it comes to spacing out your review is that you're not cramming all that information and you're not spending 6 hours the day before the exam trying to retain the information. Because unfortunately, when you do that, you may more or less get very overwhelmed. And it's really difficult to retrieve that information once you are taking the exam. So that really takes a lot of time management as well as identifying what's going to work best for you. Another technique that kind of goes hand in hand with spacing out your review is utilizing what is called the Pomodoro technique. And what that basically looks like is essentially you want to identify how long you would like to study within maybe a 1 or 2 hour span, but also identifying how long you would like to take your break and commit to that time. So that could look differently for everyone. But it could be, for example, if you want to study, I'm going to keep on saying chemistry for about an hour, maybe spending 30 minutes studying for that information, and then finally taking a 20-minute break, committing to that. And then once your timer is up for that 20-minute break, going back into the studying session. And that can be very helpful too, so it doesn't feel like you're being bogged down to just studying for a whole hour and you're able to recharge your brain as well. But also one good thing that we recommend our students whenever we have academic success coaching is to utilize a lot of different practice problems. And you could, for example, if you have a class that utilizes Pearson, Pearson has these study guides or like questions at the end of the book chapter that are helpful. If your professor recommends you using a study guide, like actually writing out and answering those questions on the study guide, but also going online as well to find additional resources like Khan Academy as well. Is there anything else that I'm missing, Julie, in regards to like spacing out the review, practicing a lot of problems?
I think you covered everything, but I definitely utilize the second technique a lot when I do get, appointments. That is something I highly recommend to them because it has helped me personally when I do go to study. So I think that one is my favorite by far.
No, it's awesome. I would have to definitely use that one. I feel like I haven't used that one yet because I tend to use the first technique a lot. So that's a really helpful one. Also, some additional study techniques too that would be helpful is, for example, if you start noticing when you're doing the study guide that the problems are becoming more difficult, really just taking a step back and then focusing on one concept at a time. So I know we're always going to encounter questions that are going to take us a little bit more time to really think about and evaluate. And it's good that we do that, especially during our study sessions, so it can prepare us for the actual exam, right? So what you want to do is really make sure that you're understanding and learning material before you actually tackle it by yourself, and really making sure that you are able to kind of retrieve some of that information, especially for those difficult questions, right? One thing that I tend to use a lot are what are called mnemonics, which are like phrases, acronyms, or even like little jingles to kind of help me memorize certain information. And I used to do that a lot, especially for one class that I took called psychopharmacology, where my friend and I, we would literally just make up all these different like sayings to kind of organize information from like low dose to high dose for psychopharmacology. And that was super effective when we were studying for that class. And not only that, but you want to make sure that you're making it fun, right? Because I know even taking the time to study can be a lot depending on your class and the material that you're studying for the class. So you want to always try to do something that's going to keep you motivated and also keep you engaged in the topic, whether that's playing music or having like the snacks or anything like that, that aren't going to be distracting for you as you're studying. You also want to try to switch between different types of problems as well. So if you do have an exam that requires not only multiple choice questions, but short essays, true or false, whatever it may be, you want to make sure that you are able to understand all those different types of problems and work on them as well during the studying section. But also one that I found to be super helpful that I tend to do a lot is actually studying in a classroom. And typically, the reason why this is really helpful is because of the context dependent memory. We're able to memorize certain things based off a specific environment. So if you're able to go into your classroom maybe the week before or 2 weeks before and actually studying in there will reduce that anxiety that you may have for that exam, but also making you feel more prepared and confident as you start taking the test. Have you done like any of these like strategies before, Julie?
I've done the studying in the classroom just because you get so into the routine of like being in your house or, just the same places where it gets like, it could become very distracting after a while. So being able to like get out of that and just kind of create a new routine is a really good way to sit there and create new like healthy habits for studying.
Yeah, and then I think you bring up a really good point too, especially when it comes to trying to do things that work best for you. So I know with me, I cannot study in my house like at all because I get easily distracted too. So I do have to like study like in the classroom or at the library. So I am minimizing the amount of distractions that I have too. So that's super important, especially when it comes to studying. And while you're doing this, it's important to note that you want to make sure that you take a break. So please do not be like me where I did study for 6 hours on end and did not take a break. And then I wondered why I was overwhelmed and exhausted. You want to make sure that you want to take at least a 20-minute, 30-minute, whatever, how long it takes for you to feel recharged and then get back to studying. And that's going to be helpful because you don't want to feel overwhelmed. You don't want to feel anxious, as well as it's going to help you increase your memory too. But not only that, if you do have the opportunity to do so, and this is case by case, spend time working on some of these problems in a group setting. So if you do have some classmates that you feel comfortable with that are taking the exact same class as you, really devoting that time to create a group session. So for example, if you don't know the answer to one particular problem, maybe one of your classmates or your friends actually know it. And I can help too, so it can kind of keep you more engaged in studying as well as keeping you more motivated and confident as you go through the problems. We also recommend utilizing different types of study sounds that kind of work best for you. So whether that can be classical music, sometimes some people say they like rain music, and that's really helpful for them. So doing things like that. And the most important one, which is the reason why it's the last one, is protecting your sleep. So on average, we do need 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And I know it's so hard, especially as we start preparing for final exams, that we feel like we have to study for 8 hours on end, and we only get like 3 to 4 hours of sleep. And while that may be helpful at times, we are more likely to forget certain things. We're exhausted as soon as the exam comes around. So we want to make sure that you are able to at least get 7 hours of sleep and feel more prepared. Is there anything else I'm missing, Julie?
No, I think you covered it all, but I
Okay.
definitely like the whole working in groups thing because we're all in group meets for classes and
Yeah.
instead of just like sending a million questions, you could like text someone in there and be like, hey, do you want to meet up and like help each other work on this? Or, because it's always good to get a fresh pair of eyes on, an assignment. So that's very helpful for me.
Yeah, exactly. Group sessions will always be your friend, especially in those really hard courses. So when it comes to memory, there are different strategies. It also depends on how you study as well. But you want to, first and foremost, you really want to make sure that you understand the information first. Especially if you are studying for an hour to 2 hours. Sometimes if we keep on looking at the exact same information, it's really hard for us to really grasp it and really build connections, things that are going to be beneficial for us as we start preparing for the exam. So really understanding the information. You want to also ensure that you're connecting the material to something that you already know, whether it's something that you learned previously before in the class, but also just anything like life skills that you know are relevant to that class. So building that connection can also improve your memory. And we mentioned a lot about self-testing, right? So if you're constantly and consistently testing yourself and quizzing yourself, either through flashcards, using study guides, or even practice questions, that can really help you feel more confident and prepared. And one that I really like to do a lot is writing things out, because I am a visual learner. So I really do like just seeing things on a board or just seeing it on paper in order to fully understand how this makes sense to me for the class and things like that. You can also talk to yourself about the material as well and talk out loud. My friend and I used to do this a lot for those really hard courses. So we'll probably walk around her apartment and we would just start saying things that were relevant to the class. And if I didn't know it, she would jump in. And if she didn't know something, I would jump in and vice versa. And that was always helpful for us. And then finally, grouping the material meaningfully. So if you can find like anything in common with the information that you have, whether it's categories or things like that, you could essentially group that information, color code it. Some people find that really helpful, and then it helps you to be able to like build that connection too. Anything with that, Julie, that I didn't cover?
I think self-testing is really important because you can use it for all subjects. Like whether it's math, you could write down like the different concepts or formulas. So it really that fits just any subject, and I think it's the best way because I feel like ever since we were all in like elementary school or middle school, we've always been like looking at flashcards. So I think that's one that you can't let follow you to college.
Yeah, I do agree with that too. And that's an important point. And then there's additional ways to also increase your motivation. So I know I talked a little bit about this earlier, but like learning styles. So when you actually understand and know how you learn or how you study, it can be very helpful and effective as you start prioritizing how often or how long you want to study the material. And essentially there's 4 different types of studying or learning behaviors. So whether you're a visual learner, auditory, reading or writing, or kinesthetic, you can fall within more than one of those. And when you start understanding your learning style, you can start adjusting how you're going to study for a particular class. So I know with me, because I am a visual learner and a reading and writing learner, I like to write things out, color code it, and then also use flashcards and then draw diagrams that are beneficial for certain classes. You want to also practice techniques, especially if you do feel anxious about the exam. And you can do this before, during, or after the exam too. So when we say techniques is more or less like practicing mindfulness or doing deep breathing, also identifying what is something that helps you kind of stay calm when you're taking the exam. So really being honest with yourself and really identifying that is going to be helpful, as well as reducing distractions. And Julie and I have talked about this a lot in the presentation where it comes to if you tend to get more distracted at home, going to the classroom or going to the library may help you study more and stay more focused. But also if you are studying at home, you could either use an app blocker, turn off your phone until you're done studying, and just do certain things like that so you aren't going to get distracted. But so with that said, it is important to manage your time as well. So I know Julie mentioned earlier that if you are preparing for like different classes during final exam week, you want to make sure that you're devoting a certain amount of time for each class and not going over or going under the amount of time that you would like to take, and then making sure that you're able to kind of move on as well. And I think all in all, even though we're talking a lot about these different ways to increase your motivation and things like that, I think the most important one that I still have to do, especially when it comes to those difficult courses, is really developing a growth mindset. And what that basically means is you're actually using positive affirmations, allowing yourself to grow. And also if you start noticing, okay, well, I'm really anxious about this exam, I don't know if I'm gonna do well, changing that thought immediately and telling yourself, well, this is just something I have to do, or I know this is going to help me later on with my career, even with other classes in undergrad, and really being positive in that aspect. Has that ever been something that you had a difficult time with when it came to growth mindset, Julie, when it came to classes?
Um, I think it would definitely be like some of the online math classes that I've taken because I
Mm,
was so used to taking like in-person classes in high school. So trying to like basically teach myself how like a whole subject online, it was very difficult and I was just sitting there thinking like, oh, I can't do this. I don't know how I'm supposed to.
yeah.
Like I'm so used to seeing it in front of me. But I think what helped me was like there's so many different resources that I have that can help me like succeed in this class, not only like online, but like especially on campus. So like just utilizing all those resources it was what helped me get through this class.
Yeah, and that's important too because studying is hard, especially depending on the class that you're taking. But when you know that there's resources out there for you, is gonna help you feel more at ease, especially when you start taking your exam. And you don't want to be hard on yourself because the fact that you even got started to study is a huge accomplishment. And it just helps you grow and actually helps you figure out later on, like, well, what else can I do to feel more prepared for my other classes, or how can I adjust this as well? So it's just a constant thing that we have to go through in college. So what to do during exam day? So before the exam and also on exam day is super, super important. I cannot stress it enough to get enough rest the night before. So once again, I said this 7 to 9 hours of sleep um, is helpful so we can feel more recharged and fresh, especially as we start getting prepared for our exam, but also eating a really good meal too. So definitely, and I know this is over exaggeration, but definitely not like having a greasy burger and french fries in the morning would be helpful, right? So you want to make sure that you're getting enough nutrition and things like that in order to feel prepared for the exam. And I think the last 3 points too, they're all combined with each other, but knowing when to stop studying, making sure that you're using your time wisely before the exam, and also stopping resetting are so important because you don't want to spend so much time cramming all that information in the hour before the exam because you're just going to get overwhelmed, and more than likely you may end up forgetting some information that might have been there that you wanted to remember. So those are super important. What are some other things that you feel like were helpful for you, Julie, when it came to like preparing the morning of the exam or even a couple hours before the exam?
I think there's already one of my things on the list. It's the last bullet point. I think
Mhm.
that was definitely a big thing when it comes to like preparing for these exams because you always just want to cram and studying to the very last minute or just
Yeah.
like do it up until like right until you're about to take the exam, but like the night before you can't just like study all night and not get good sleep. Like I feel like that point really affects that entire list because some people may not want to eat like because they're so nervous, but just knowing when to like calm down and just say, wait, like I'm still human. I still need to eat breakfast. I still need to do this stuff in order to get on with my day and actually do good on this exam.
Yes, definitely. Please do not cram and making sure that you at least manage your time, especially that week to 2 weeks before the exam, so you don't feel like you have to start studying within an hour before the exam or even less than is super important. And while you're taking the exam too, some couple techniques are helpful, as well as making sure not to drink too much water or caffeine. So you don't want to be too jittery. Unfortunately, I've done that before. It was not fun while I was taking the exam. So that's super important. But also making sure to arrive to class early. So if you do want a quick little refresher without cramming everything in, you have that opportunity to do that. In addition, making sure you have like all your materials and things like that. Now, while you're taking an exam, some tips that will be helpful will be answering a question that you already know first. So I tend to do that a lot, especially with those questions that I feel more comfortable with. I make sure that I just knock them out of the way, especially if I have a 50 question exam, and then going back to those questions that I already skipped. So it's important that in those 2 points, you're making sure that you're managing your time effectively during the exam. So you do have the ability to go back and answer those questions. But not only that, if you, for example, misread a question, miscalculated a problem, or recalled more information regarding a particular question, you can go back and change that answer too. But I highly and strongly recommend to not second guess yourself and change your first answer, because I've done that a lot where I kind of doubted my answer and said, well, maybe it's not this, it's probably C or B or whatever it may be. Making sure that you don't spend too much time doing that, because I've always been told that the first choice was always the best choice as well. Are there anything else that I'm missing in regards to like some techniques to do as well when it comes to taking the exam, Julie?
I think you covered it all because
Okay.
it's mostly like common sense, but we always tend to forget it on the day of, something very
Yeah.
important. So this is like I like to make a to-do list like on the day of. I'll be like, okay, make sure you eat breakfast, like make sure you do this because you tend to forget these important things.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point with the to-do list as well, to make sure you're on top of it as well when you're trying to take the exam beforehand. And then as you're taking it, and after you're taking the exam, you want to make sure that you focus on yourself. So sometimes there may be that one person that finished 20 or 30 minutes before and that kind of trips you up or makes you anxious. Just making sure that you stay present and just really focusing on your progress in the exam is important, and as well as doing what works best for you as you're answering the questions. So if you do go back, you have that time to go back, or if you start thinking of your mnemonics or little jingles that are helpful for you, you're able to do that. And I alluded to this earlier with practicing deep breathing and mindfulness. You can do that during the exam, before the exam, or after the exam, and it's super effective to keep you grounded. But when you're done with the exam, making sure that you move on. Please do not think negatively or ruminate about how poorly you did, because it's just going to make you feel bad about it, but also thinking positively about what did go well after the exam, and really treating yourself, because the amount of time that you started studying for exam is important. You should treat yourself for the effort that you did for it as well. So we have additional resources that we wanted to discuss that will be helpful when it comes to test taking strategies as well as studying. So one that is really important, we talked a lot about this when it comes to self-testing and the importance of studying, is really taking responsibility not only of your education but studying habits. Because I know there may be difficult points in time in our semester that kind of makes us feel less motivated to study, or it's really hard for us to manage our time, but we have to constantly remind ourselves the reason why we're studying and how it's going to be helpful for us, not only for the next class that we need to take, but also for our careers, whether it's graduate school or finding a job after college. And it's important to set really clear goals with yourself when it comes to studying, right? So if you want to achieve a certain grade for your exam, you have to really be realistic and identify, well, what can I do in order to achieve that grade, right? So setting clear goals. And then finally, the third and fourth one can be combined, but really reminding yourself of why this exam is relevant or why this class is relevant while you're studying. And then imagining your future self within the next 5 to 6 years, how you're able to use this as an important skill. Are there any other additional tricks or information that would be helpful to tell the students, Julie?
I think those ones really set like just the foundation for it, because with those four, like points, you can just build off of them and find out whatever works for you the best. And that's the thing about, being able to set your own goals and, being able to create your own study habits. It's tailored to you and how you are as a person and how you are as a student.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. Like everything's case by case, and I know we provided you all with a lot of different techniques that could be helpful, but you really want to make sure that you do something that is going to work best for you when it comes to studying, depending on your learning style, also your schedule, and things along that line. And additional things to be mindful of is really organizing your time. We strongly suggest, even in the beginning of the semester, to write down the dates of your midterm, your final exam, even quizzes, in a planner or on your calendar to help you stay on top of it, but also prioritizing your time as well, and really making sure how often you want to study this class, how long you want to study it, and really being realistic with yourself. So even though we talked a lot about the things that are helpful and what we can do to improve our memory and to make us feel more prepared for our exam, there are a lot of do nots, right? So please, please, please do not cram before a test. Do not be like me and try to study 6 hours before the exam, because that is not helpful at all. It will just make you feel even overwhelmed. And also, you're not going to remember a lot of that information, right? You don't want to multitask. Do not use social media while studying. Sometimes I get tripped up with this as well, so I have to end up using my app blocker, just putting my phone somewhere. Do not actively study. So what that basically means is and I know I'm going to keep on using a lot of biology and chemistry examples, but if you have your book open to chapter 2 for your biology class, you're just looking at the paragraph, but you're not really digesting or really reading the information. So you want to make sure that you're actively studying while you're doing that. But you don't want to be disorganized as well. So if you have like a lot of clutter and things like that, making sure that the space that you're studying at is very clear, so it won't be distracting, as well as procrastinating. Are there any other do nots that will be helpful to kind of talk about? I know this is not an exhaustive list.
No, you covered a lot of them, and I think the
Okay.
social media, or like, just being distracted by like your electronic devices, that's such a big one, especially for me. Like, I know once like I get a text or something, I'm on my phone for like the next hour, and I'm like, why did I just do that?
Right, or like, where did the time go? I thought I was supposed to be studying for this class. So yes, please do not do this at all, because it's just going to decrease your productivity, as well as affect how long you want to study for your subject. But also using additional resources, right? So if you need help identifying a way to study for a class or the material, if it's available, please attend the SI sessions. We have amazing SI leaders, and it's basically led by students, and they actually help you understand the material outside the classroom, right? So if you do have that availability, please attend those sessions. They're really good. But in addition to that, making sure that you make an appointment with the tutoring and testing center is also one thing that we recommend if you want additional help understanding or learning the material prior to the exam. We mentioned this a lot, using your classmates as well, or creating a study group session to learn the material. But the most important one as well is, if you do need additional help, like identifying a way to study for a class or test taking strategies, please do not hesitate to make an appointment with an academic success coach. There's 7 of us. We can definitely help out, and then we can teach you all different techniques and tricks that we've learned throughout our undergraduate career that's going to be also helpful for you to feel successful too. So as we're coming to a close for the presentation, we just wanted to go through some overviews and things like that. So as we mentioned, study can be really difficult depending on the classes that you may have or how many classes that you're taking, but it's super helpful to find out what is going to work for you when it comes to studying in order to attain your academic, personal, and professional goals. And we may encounter different challenges as well, whether it's procrastinating, test anxiety, that may prevent us from studying, right? But Julie and I were able to kind of tell you guys different strategies and techniques that are going to help you all out to not only increase your memory, but also improve your motivation to study, right? So it's important to really identify that strategy to help you feel more prepared and also remain calm during test day. Are there any other final points that you want to bring up, Julie, when it comes to like studying or things like that we covered?
One thing I want to bring up is, like, if you do make a meeting with an academic success coach, just remember that like whatever you're going through, we have probably gone through, and like so has half of this school. So don't feel embarrassed. Don't even stress it, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to help you and like just try and alleviate some of your stress. So make an appointment with us and we'll help you to the best that we can.
Yes, Please do. We're all students too, and Julie also made up a really good point that we've all been through it. We've had difficult classes and then just schedules that are chaotic at times. So we're more than happy to help you all out. And good segue for that too, when it comes to academic success coaching, if you really do need help, like just identifying, modifying, or just increasing your studying test taking strategies, please do not hesitate to make an appointment with us. We mentioned before that we do meet one-on-one with students for about 50 to 60 minutes, and then we try to tailor that session based off of what you cannot talk today, that you would really like to work on in order to enhance your professional, academic, and personal growth. So in order to make an appointment with us, you want to go to navigate via Shark link, and then you want to click on schedule an appointment. And then there's 3 different drop-down series. So the first one, you want to click Tutoring Testing Center, and then the final 2, Academic Success Coaching. Next, you want to choose Tutoring Testing Center. We're located in the Student Affairs building on the 2nd floor. So the building is right next to Rosenthal as well as Mailman Siegel. And you want to schedule and find an available appointment that works for you. So for example, I'm available like Wednesday and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then you're available during which times, Julie?
I'm in the office on Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays from 2 to 4.
Yeah, and we do have people that are here from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. So depending on your class schedule or anything else, we always have an academic success coach available. So you want to read through the description and confirm. And if you want any like email reminders or reminder via text message, you want to check that box for reminders. And then finally, your appointment has been scheduled. So as we're coming to a close, we want to thank you all so much for attending our last workshop series for this semester. We're going to have more once again for next semester, so please stay tuned for that. And then please follow us on Instagram for updates. Our contact information is here. Our website is indicated. Our phone number is here, as well as being located in the Students Affairs building on the 2nd floor. And once again, if you want to follow us on Instagram just to meet the student staff, get to know more information about what we're doing, because we also host social events, our Instagram accounts are indicated right here. But we also have additional study resources on Pinterest and YouTube. So do anyone have any questions for us? I think we have a few minutes to go through some questions.
Also, if you don't feel comfortable like talking, you can leave them in the chat.
Yes, thank you. All right, well, if no one has any questions, thank you so much, everyone, for